And we are back with another episode of Mess to Mission. And I have Taylor here today. And actually, I'm going to let her do her semi intro herself. But I'm super passionate about this topic, and we will dive into more of that why. But Taylor's here to tell her Mess to Mission story. And she is a dietitian. And I just can't wait to see all of the things that we're going to talk about because what she specializes in is my favorite. So, Taylor, thank you so much for being here. And just tell the audience a little bit about you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Long time coming. We've had to reschedule a couple of times on both our ends, so
Yes.
I'm excited we're finally making this happen. But yeah, so like Lindsay said, I'm a registered dietitian and I specialize in helping women proactively transition off of hormonal birth control. And this is very much tied to, as we'll get into, my own personal story with coming off of birth control and having horrible side effects and seeing that being a huge gap in women's care that no one else filled, and really helping women get to the root of hormonal imbalances at the source, because a lot of times women are put on birth control for a reason other than pregnancy prevention or in combination with pregnancy prevention. It's literally the most widely prescribed medication for women, and it has lots of side effects that women aren't told about. And then they're doing damage control when they stop, or maybe are wanting to get pregnant and having trouble. And so my whole goal is to help women safely transition off of hormonal birth control with minimal side effects or side effect free by planning and proactively preparing ahead of time.
Yes, and I love that. I can't wait to hear your story because I was put on very early, and I think that's just what we did. Like, I think that's just what my mom was told to do as soon as, like, I had started my like, I was very young whenever I started, and I did the pill, the patch, the all the things up into the IUD and all of that, and I mean, just hormones and variations, it's just so understudied, so I can't wait to hear kind of your personal journey of how you got here.
Yeah. So similar. I mean, I was put on, I know some of my clients have been put on way earlier than this, but I was put on birth control at 18 years old when I lost my period. And it was one of those things that same, like we went to the doctor and I was like a really healthy eater and I exercised. And so it was just something that we didn't really know what was going on. And so my mom took me to my doctor and their answer was just take birth control. And no deeper digging was done, nothing additional was asked. And it was kind of like a just stay on this until you want to get pregnant. A lot of assumptions made of like you're going off to college. And so it's probably good that you're on birth control already. No, I wasn't sexually active in college. And so I started taking the pill. And then a couple weeks later, I got my period. And so we're like, yay, this is working, right? Like problem solved, didn't think about it. So I stayed on birth control for about 10 years. And then I was listening. So I was a practicing dietitian at that time. I finished grad school, my internship, all that kind of stuff. So I was on birth control for, 10 plus years. And I was listening to this podcast with Alyssa Vitti, and she is a women's health expert. She's written multiple books, including In the Flow, which I would highly recommend to any woman. Basically, she was talking about on this podcast I was listening to about how you're not actually having a period on hormonal birth control. And so I was just sitting there and my mind was absolutely blown because here I am I was 27, 28 years old at this point, and I had no clue what was happening in
Yeah.
my own body. And so I went down this rabbit hole of doing a bunch of like research, and I read her books and listened to podcasts. And I just was like mind blown at everything I didn't know and all the negative side effects that birth control was having that I wasn't informed of. And with any medication, there's side effects, of course, but it was just so surprising that it was something where I was never told, like, this could happen, and all these symptoms I was experiencing, like anxiety and my irregular periods and stuff, all made a lot of sense, and I'd always dealt with acne, and so there was just so much stuff that I learned. So I made the personal decision after researching to stop birth control, and I quit cold turkey because that's what I went to my doctor and she was basically like, you can just stop and see what happens, and so that's what I did, and several months later I just struggled with full face acne, lots and lots of anxiety, fatigue. I just felt like a stranger in my own body. And I didn't have any support. I went to my doctor, I went to my dermatologist, and they basically were like, well, I did all the things. Like specifically acne was the biggest one for me because it was on my face and it was very embarrassing. you know, did tretinoin, I did antibiotics, I did all the fancy chemical peels, and I had a stellar facial routine and skincare, and it just kept popping up. And so when I exhausted all those options, basically my dermatologist just said, well, your only option is to go back on birth control. And I remember leaving her office, like holding back tears, sitting in my car, being like, I know this isn't the solution, but I don't know what else to do. So I really felt stuck between a rock and a hard place. And so I went down another Google rabbit hole and pursued functional nutrition training because I was very conventionally trained as a dietitian. So I decided to pursue functional nutrition training and I learned all about root cause healing, specifically related to like acne, hormones, period, skin. And I was just really, my eyes were open to all the different avenues of healing that I didn't learn before. And so I started seeing that over and over again in my own life of women who were dealing with these things and they were just told to be to just take birth control or to go back on birth control. So that's what made me open my own business, Nourished by Taylor, to help women proactively prep to come off of birth control. Because when you have a plan, you address those deeper imbalances before coming off. You won't have a horrible transition off, and it doesn't have to be another horror story. Because I'm sure everyone listening has done it themselves, have had friends who have transitioned off, and they have all these side effects, and those things can be avoided. You just need the right plan and the right support to make that happen.
I also just wish there was so much more education in the beginning, like when you're younger. Like, I remember thinking, I was talking to a friend about this actually. Like, we were talking about most of my friend group now have the Aura Ring, and even just how to track a cycle, the different phases of your cycle, learning about hormones, learning that there's going to be a doctor that's going to tell you your blood sample is perfect. And that does not mean that everything is well and happy and good. And being like an advocate for your health, especially in women's health, because there's so many other ways, like you're saying, nutrition and all of these things that fall in alignment to be able to keep you healthy, eliminate anxiety, but you're not taught those things. You're taught go to the doctor, and then 90% of the time you get these additional, I guess, additional pills or advice, and you want to trust that those things are going to be what's best for you, but it's so not a one size fits all.
Yes, absolutely. And that's where, you know, I always use the analogy of like if you have a mole or something like that you are unsure of, you wouldn't go to your general doctor to like ask about that. You would go to like a dermatologist, you would go to a specialist. And it's the same thing with coming off of birth control, right? Like this isn't to bash doctors, it's really just to shed light on the fact that they aren't trained. I mean, women weren't included in clinical research trials until the 1990s, right? So there's so much information that doctors don't know about women's health. And I had to pursue a lot of additional education, even with a master's degree in nutrition, to learn about this stuff to heal myself and through clinical practice, working with, dozens of women at this point. So it really is a specialty, but a lot of women don't know about it, which is why I'm on a mission to get this information out there because so many women are suffering with it, but they just don't have the tools and the strategies to know what to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So don't give us all the secrets, but when you're talking about strategies, how do you kind of assess what's going to be independently good for person A or person B and kind of walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah. So my big thing is test versus guess. I talk a lot about this because I rely on functional testing, and these are not your standard doctor, just run some basic labs. This is really in depth functional testing that I learned from my functional nutrition training that uncover the underlying impacts or like effects of birth control. So we're looking at what's your gut doing because birth control negatively impacts your gut. It encourages the growth of bad bacteria, discourages the growth of good bacteria, and your gut is like huge for your skin, your mental health. Obviously, if you have any digestive issues, all of it's connected. We're looking at mineral testing because minerals are so, so important for the health of all of your cells and resiliency, thyroid health, metabolism. We're looking at, copper is a big one because so many women are struggling with anxiety, depression, a lot of stress, just feeling like anything sets them off or they're not. I can't tell you how many women I talk to and they're like, I just don't feel like myself when coming off birth control or when on birth control. And it's because birth control literally impacts your brain. And one way it does that is a buildup of copper, which is a mineral that it's important. But when we have excess copper, estrogen builds copper in the body. And when you have excess copper, it gets stored in the brain. And that can cause anxiety, depression, panic attacks, insomnia, all that kind of stuff. So those are things that we're also testing too that your doctor just doesn't know about and isn't testing for. So testing and doing the right tests gives us the information we need to build a customized protocol for you. And then once we know what your body has been screaming for, then we can use targeted nutrition and supplement and lifestyle strategies. But I remember, from using myself as an example, just wasting so much money and so much time. Like I struggled with post birth control syndrome for 4 years because I didn't have the right testing and I didn't know what was going on. So it's so helpful to actually have those answers versus throwing spaghetti at the wall and kind of like seeing what sticks per se.
Yeah. So, there's something you just said when you were talking about copper. Isn't there, like, an actual, like, full copper IUD? Like, that seems counterintuitive to what you just said. I was like,
There
"Wait,
is.
I'm
There
pretty sure somebody told me to put copper inside of my body." So now I'm a little concerned.
Yes, so there is a copper IUD. I actually have the copper IUD, and so it's not
Okay.
bad. It's just a matter of you have like, this is one of those tests that I wish doctors knew about, and I wish it was standard procedure to test this on women when they're coming off birth control. Again, a reason why I specialize in this because I know these nuances that other people don't, but it's not always bad, but if someone does have high copper, then or their body can't detoxify it, then the copper IUD is going to be one of those horror stories of like the really heavy, really painful periods. That's one thing that I think people know about with the copper IUD if that might happen. But if you don't have high copper, then it can be a totally fine thing to do. I didn't know that much about fertility
Interesting.
awareness method. And so I just wanted a non-hormonal birth control option, not wanting kids that I could use. So that's why I did the copper IUD. But some of my clients who have high copper that's one of the things I work on with them is detoxifying that copper, and then it may or may not be something that they can do, but it definitely can cause more reactions and side effects if that's not tested for.
That's, like, the first time in my entire life I've ever heard that, and that is wild to me because I try to go down the I'm not, like, fully down the rabbit hole, but I'm, like, enough to be, like, dangerous, but not, like, didn't go to school for it because I try to be cognizant of all the things that, you know, I'm not anti-modern medicine for any reason, it's just
Right.
I've experienced issues with infertility, I've experienced miscarriages, I've experienced all of these things, and nobody could provide me an answer why. Nobody could provide me an answer of why I felt sick. Nobody could provide me an answer of X, Y, and Z. And so it just you're the first person, hand to God, that I have come in contact that's even talked about testing like that. And I think it's such an important message to convey to women listeners everywhere because we don't get a lot of specialty testing. I mean, they took my blood and they were like, "Oh, everything looks okay. You don't have any infections." And I'm like, "That's great. Love not having an infection, 10 out of 10, but, like, I something is wrong. Like, something is not in alignment here. I don't feel in alignment. Just because I don't have a high white blood cell count doesn't mean that I'm, like,
Yes.
smooth sailing if I'm still having all of these women health and infertility issues." And it was like nobody knew where to go next. Nobody knew where to dive in deeper, and I think that's where what you do is so important, and it's so important to know that there are other avenues because you kind of feel discouraged when you're leaving, like, the OBGYN or one of those doctors because 'cause you're pigeonholed without the answers, and if one more person just told me, "Oh, yeah, it could just be anxiety," it's like, I don't know that that is it, like, I know I'm pretty intuitive, and that's not what I'm feeling for that situation.
1000%. And that's the biggest when I'm talking with women and when they're thinking about potentially working with me, that's their biggest fear. Because by the time someone gets to me, typically they've exhausted all the conventional routes. And I'm the same way with you. Like I'm not against, I'm a good blend, I say, of I'm a hybrid of like conventional and functional. Because I see the need for both. And I think both are valid. It's just a matter of like knowing when you need what path and unfortunately, I think conventional medicine, it's just very behind the times when it comes to women's health in particular. We're very much treated like smaller men and women are left feeling defeated, broken, discouraged, stuck. frustrated, not knowing what to do because they haven't been given that right support because doctors just don't they aren't trained in that. So, it definitely the biggest thing women say is like, I'm just scared of investing again. And I'm coming back, my labs are coming back normal. And I tell them, I see this all the time. I have my own podcast and I was just recording a podcast about this. I've never had anyone's lab come back normal ever because the labs I run are so specialized and the way I'm looking at them is so different. So, for example, I just went through with a client who I just began working with, and in her discovery call, because I offer like a free consultation call, that was her fear. And so I was like, she was like, I just got all these labs run by my doctor and they were told I look healthy and normal. And I was like, do you have those labs? And she was like, yeah. I was like, pull them up. Let's look at them together. So I went through her labs and I was like, that's not normal to me. That's not normal to me. That's not normal to me because I have a much more narrow reference range of what I consider normal. I'm looking at what's optimal for women's health versus what's normal for men and women until it's being flagged as a disease state. So I think that's very, very important of, for example, our insulin. Typically, it's a very broad range. I mean, I think it's to maybe 14 of like what insulin could be. But for me, my range is I want it to be 5 to 6. If it's any higher than that, then that's high for me. That's something I want to target. And that can lead to infertility. That can lead to blood sugar dysregulation, all of that. So you have to have the right labs run, but you also have to have the right person looking at your labs.
Yes. And I also think that it's so interesting to me because I'd actually talked to somebody like, so for reference, I'm 5 foot, 125 pounds. My husband's 6'4". He's a much larger friend than I am. And it's like, what are when labs are normal, like who is normal?
Yeah.
Who sets the standard for normal? Because my normal and his normal, I can tell you, one, neither of us are normal, but two, we both require such a different set of normal. Like, he shouldn't be 125 pounds at 6'4". So, like, who sets the normalized standard? And that's why I get so frustrated when you kind of get pigeonholed into, well, this is normal, that is normal. It's like, who woke up one day and they were like, you are the example for normal and moving forward we will compare you to the rest of the universe. And it's like, oh, it's a collection of studies and ranges of who's normal. And I'm like, yeah, but you could be an outlier. And it's just interesting to me how all of those things may or may not be taken into play and how different doctors portray normal. It just feels very subjective instead of objective.
Yeah. Yeah, and bringing it back to the birth control piece too, like this relates because it's like, oh, you have painful periods, just go on birth control. Oh, you're missing periods, go on birth control. Oh, you have acne, go on birth control. And there's interesting research about how the earlier you get put on birth control, the more likely you are to experience negative health side effects down the road. So, for example, there's one study that shows women who are put on birth control, I think it was like 12 to 18 or something like that, but they have up to an 80% chance higher risk, or they're 80% more likely to develop depression. And that's huge because
Yeah.
think about, I mean, you were put on it before you were 18. I was put on it at 18. And just think of how many women are struggling with anxiety, depression, mental health stuff, or like any physical symptoms too. So again, I'm not against birth control. I just think that we need to be asking those deeper questions of like, well, why are you having painful periods? Why are you having irregular periods? I know for myself, it was because I had an undiagnosed eating disorder. I wasn't eating enough. I was over exercising. Like that was the reason my periods were irregular. And that's happened to a lot of my clients too.
Yeah. And I think that you're right. I think that it goes back to there's definitely a correlation, I think, to the mental health space, the anxiety, all of the things. And then what frustrates me even more is that you're kind of led to make, not always, not everybody's like this, but you're kind of led to like be made to feel like, oh, that should be normal. You should feel like that. Like anxiety should be normal. This should be something that you're experiencing or that can be a side effect. And it's like, okay, that's a big side effect. Like if you're walking around anxious all day and that's part of your mental health journey, that can have a bigger effect than like I always refer it back to it's like, oh, this is a new medicine on the market. Side effects include X, Y, Z, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, da 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 da. It's like I would almost rather just have had the headache instead of the 72 side effects that you just rattled off to me. Like just let me be over here with my headache and let's carry on with that. I don't know. I get so passionate about this topic, I think, because you're kind of dismissed for most of the time about these symptoms, or you start down the rabbit hole with one symptom, and to treat that symptom, then you get symptoms A, B, C, D, E, F, G from that one thing. And it's like you're kind of just setting your body up for masking what could be the underlying root cause.
Yes, 1000%. So, if you're an entrepreneur listening to this too, it's like, think about how that impacts your business. If you are not feeling good or you're out of commission for 2 months out of the whole, or 2 months, 2 weeks out of the entire month, maybe it feels like 2 months, then that's negatively impacting your entrepreneurial journey and like your ability to build the business that you want. So that's, something that I talk a lot because I tend to attract myself, right? So women who are like me, who are like high achievers, type A personalities, go getters, and they can't do what they want to do or reach their goals when they don't feel good or when they're experiencing these symptoms. And just go back on birth control or just take birth control is not helping it. It's just masking those deeper things and it's actually making things worse in the long term.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that it's when you're talking about entrepreneurs, like one thing I was also thinking about, I know you had mentioned along the kid line. So we do have 3 kids. And I don't know if you've ever been down bad or any of the listeners ever been down bad. And then you have 3 kids and businesses to run and all the things. Like you don't get to stop. You don't. I always joke like if you've ever had a kid and a hangover, it's the worst combination because they don't care. They don't care that you feel like junk. They don't care. They don't care regardless. Well, taking care of yourself and knowing what's going on with your body has to be a top priority because you don't wanna feel like crap. You don't wanna miss 2 weeks of work or be unable to create content or record a podcast or see a patient or see a client, and it kind of has that snowball effect. But as an entrepreneur, what's one thing that you wish you would what is one thing that you wish you would have known prior to being a business owner that you wish somebody would have taught you or a skill set that you wish you would have had kind of jumping into that journey?
I think the biggest thing is that you're always learning. So you're always, I'm sure
Yeah.
like every entrepreneur listening is like, hell yes.
Yeah.
That's what it's like the double-edged sword of like being an entrepreneur of it's like it's so fun because it's never stagnant, but then it's also sometimes exhausting of like right when you get in the groove of things, you're like, oh well, this isn't working anymore. Like I gotta change with the times, or like I gotta change this or that, or like this isn't working, but this is. And so I think that's the biggest thing of just you're always going to be learning and growing. And that's okay. So not to get complacent or I know so my business is going to be 2 years old in January. So it'll be like 2 years of me owning this business and running this business full time after quitting my full time job. And I came into business when it was like just a really rough time. Like I joined a coaching program and it was very much Instagram based. And that's where I do a lot of my marketing. And the strategies that I was being taught worked really well for a cohort 3+ years ago prior to me. But then when we came in, my cohort really struggled with the skills and the strategies that were being told to us. And so it really forced me to look beyond that and to get out into the community and do like in-person networking. And, I developed my own podcast and launched that. And so I'm really grateful for that, even though it sucked at the time to have paid $10,000 to something that I was like, okay, this isn't working. It
Yeah.
forced me to get out of that box. And I know some of those other entrepreneurs who had success with Instagram and they kept doing the same thing over and over again. And they would be in our chat and being like, this isn't working, or like, I think I'm going to quit my business and all that. And I'm like, girl, you just got to like, get scrappy and you got to figure something else out. And so I was
You got to
glad that I
pivot.
at a rough time that forced me to learn that and like learn that for the long haul versus just getting complacent.
Yeah, you definitely have to pivot. And not even just that. Somebody's gonna invent a new platform every year that people feel the need to be a part of. It's like, well, first we just had to do Facebook, and then we had to do Facebook and Instagram, and then we had to add LinkedIn, and then we came to Pinterest, and that was the thing, and then we had to go to Threads, and it's like, okay, we get it. And then now you have to get on and do a dance on TikTok and spill your life's secrets about your mother's Thanksgiving. Like, it's exhausting. And it's to stay public and relevant in all the things. There's such an unnecessary pressure that's created to do all of these different things, and you don't have to. You don't have to be on TikTok dancing and all of the things to run your business. I am a huge supporter of being in your local community, though. Like, I do think that is extremely beneficial and super underrated. There's a lot of
Yes.
people who are really great in the online space, but if you're not pouring back into your local community or being a part of that, 10 out of 10 recommend.
Yes. I agree.
But as you're kind of going down your entrepreneur journey, like, tell me a little bit about what you're doing now, like what services you're offering, what things are coming down the pipeline. Name drop the podcast girl, name drop it all. So tell us a little bit about kind of what you're doing currently.
Yeah. So in my business, I offer one on one coaching and I see women. I'm based in Columbus, Ohio, but I see women across the country. And with all of my different offers, there's an offer that ranges anywhere from less than $500 to upwards of, $4,000. So it just depends on what level of coaching you want, what your goals are, how much support you want, and, hand holding you want and around that. And each one offers some form of functional testing. So whether it's the less than 500 or the 4,000 mark, there's some sort of functional lab testing and personalized plan for you. And it really helps if you are looking to transition off birth control. Maybe you got off and you are hitting that hormonal chaos and you're like, what the heck is happening? I have no clue what to do. Or if you're someone who maybe you've been off birth control for a long time or you've never been on birth control, but you have super painful periods or mood swings or acne that you're dealing with, that is all my jam and something that I work with women on. So, again, coming off birth control is primarily who I market to, but also, if you're off birth control or that hasn't been a part of your story, but you have hormonal imbalances, would love to help support you with targeted functional lab testing, nutrition strategies, lifestyle stuff. And that's all on my website, which you have. And then I also have a free breakup with birth control masterclass as well. So if you want to get a little bit more of the taste of what those labs look like, what it looks like in action, I have case studies, I have examples in there of like what it looks like in real life, then that's a really great free resource that I would start with. And then my podcast is She's in Sync. So she's IN Sync.
Very clever. I love that. Very, very clever. So, for those who are listening only and aren't watching, go ahead and name drop your socials too. So that way they can know kind of where to reach you and website, all the things.
Yep. So I'm most active on Instagram. So that's at Nourished by Tay. And then my website is nourished dash by by dash taylor.com. I had to think about that for a second. So nourished by taylor.com. So like I said, if you're interested in working together or referring a client, I also offer free strategy calls just to kind of chat. I want to make for sure it's a mutual good fit, discuss what offer would be the best, answer any questions, make sure someone's 100% confident in their decision. And yeah, you can reach out on Instagram or on my website. Other than that, I am on Threads a little bit. Same thing at Nourished by Tay, but I am not. I have a
I
TikTok. That's
love
the
it.
one social media I feel like too old for. So I was thinking about that the other
Yes.
day in light of my conversation with you. Man, at some point, I might have to just, like, hire someone younger than me to, like, be on TikTok because that's just the one I tried it, I just don't get it, like, I don't like it. But
I just am at a like my videos are all over the place. Like if I ever decease and somebody grabs my TikTok, my For You page is out of control. Like it is so sporadic. You have no idea what's ever coming down the pipeline. They'd be like, she was insane. Well, Taylor, thank you so much for being here today, talking about your mess to mission journey. I'm definitely going to put everything down in the show notes, but I'm so glad that we finally got to connect because that is something that I had experienced. And I think it's a journey that doesn't get talked about a lot. And I think that it's something that doesn't really get communicated out the way that it should. And the education is really hard to find if you're not utilizing the resources. So thank you for coming on here today and telling us all about your business and your journey.
yeah, thank you for having me, appreciate it.